Right, so I'm going to start talking about the land cover map, and then it's going to go on to Emily, who's going to talk about the crop map and the hedgerow data set. And this is a kind of team effort, the land cover map data sets. But the way I'm going to go through the presentation today is to just talk to begin with about what a land cover map is, then how a land cover map's created. Then I'm going to get into how you can actually use the land cover map data before going on to the land cover data sets that we have, because we have quite a wide range of data sets now. I'm also going to talk about our land cover change data set, which we released a couple of years ago, and then discuss how we access the data and the range of data formats that we have for the land cover map. So what is the land cover map? The land cover map is a data set basically, and it tells you what land cover is where across the UK. And knowing what land cover you've got is very important for a wide range of environmental problems. Um, the land cover classes that we have cover basically the full range of land cover types we have in the UK. So we have 2 woodland classes for broadleaf and coniferous classes. We have a range of lowland classes like arable, improved grassland. We also have upland classes as well, like acid grassland, heather, bog, inland rock, and we have some coastal classes as well as urban and suburban. So the land cover map characterises the land cover of the UK. We have 2 different palettes for the land cover map. So we have our standard palette, which we've been using for a long time, but in the last couple of years, we've also introduced a colorblind friendly palette, which shows some of the key classes in a better color palette for people that can't see, particularly kind of red green color blindness. In terms of how we make the land cover map, it's quite useful to understand where the land cover data comes from, because it's not the same as the kind of data you might get from the Ordnance Survey. So what we do is we take satellite images, we prepare them, we then have this big training data set where we tell our image classification algorithm what land cover type we've got where and what a particular land cover type looks like spectrally. And that allows us to classify the land cover of the UK, which we do in tiles, and stitch it together to get our final data set. But understanding that it's based on image classification of satellite data is important, because sometimes we do get errors in the land cover data, which might seem odd if you're assuming that somebody has kind of looked at a particular field and decided what the land cover is. That's not how it works. We use satellite data and an algorithm. Most of the time it works really well. Occasionally it will do strange things, but we're working on those strange things to reduce them and to improve the quality of the data. So what can you do with a land cover map or land cover data? There's a lot of things that you can do with it, and I can't go through all of them now. But some of the most common things that people do are, first of all, they can use the land cover data to characterize a particular area. So you might be interested in 2 different woodlands, and you might want to know what the landscape is like around them. So you can use the land cover data to find that out. So you might find that one is very kind of in a very much an arable area, and the other one might be kind of more in an urbanized area or might be in an upland area. So getting statistics to characterize an area to understand the county or the area you're working in is important. But also looking at the differences and the similarities between different study sites is also kind of one of the very common uses of the land cover data. But you can also take the land cover data and combine it with other data sets to make new maps or new products. So if you've got information about how the soil or how the land cover affects runoff in water runoff in sort of rainstorms and things like that, you can look at the hydrological properties and you can make a map that is more suitable for kind of understanding how rainfall interacts with the environment. So the way that rainfall interacts with urban areas is very different from the way that rainfall might interact with arable areas or with woodland. So you can use our data with existing knowledge that you might have about properties of different land cover types to make something that is more appropriate for the environmental problem that you want to study. And you can also use our data to input directly into models that use land cover. So that might be to look at hydrological properties, it might be to look at ecological properties, or how a particular species moves through the landscape. So there's a lot of different ways that you can use the land cover data. And we've just got two examples here. One study that looked at the quality of England's floodplains, which looked to see what was actually on the floodplain area and whether it was land cover types where water could easily kind of run off into the rivers, or whether it had been urbanized. And also a second example that was looking at urbanization and change over time and how that would affect ecosystem services. So the land cover data can be used in a wide range of ways and for a very broad range of environmental issues and questions. We now have a long kind of series of land cover data sets. The first land cover map we've got is for 1990. We reproduced that data set and re-released it in 2020 to make it more consistent with the rest of the land cover maps. And from 2017, we've been producing annual land cover data sets. One thing to note is that 2000 and 2007 have a slightly different land cover class structure and a slightly different spatial structure. So they are different from the others. And we will come back to that in a minute. In 2020, we also released our first land cover change dataset, which was specifically looking at land cover change between 1990 and 2015. And the results showed from that showed that woodland and urban had increased at the expense of arable and particularly grassland. So I don't think there was anything particularly unexpected in what it found, but what we did find was actual kind of numbers for those changes, but the kind of changes that we all see happening in the landscape around us. And because it's a spatial data set, we can also look at those trends spatially. So this just shows the change in grassland. So you can see the counties that had lost most grassland. And also that there were some counties where actually the amount of grassland has actually increased between 1990 and 2015. And because we've got a range of data sets, we can look at those changes across the different data sets as well. So for woodland, we can see that there have been the biggest increases in Scotland. In terms of accessing the data are available from CEH's EIDC data center, but also from the EDINA Digimap service as well. And the data sets are under the environmental collection in EDINA Digimap. And if you Google for EDINA Digimap and LCM, then you'll get the right link. When you actually want to get the land cover map data, though, it is a little bit more complicated because we do produce the data in a range of formats. So if you're interested in the highest spatial resolution, then the 10-meter classified pixels are probably the product you want to go for. If you're taking our data and linking it with other data, particularly data that might be woodland data at stand level or some kind of field data, then you might be better off with the vector data set, because the vector data set shows land parcels, which are things like fields or small patches of woodland. If you're interested in modeling, then the 1K data sets might be the better kind of data sets to look at. So the data set that you choose is very dependent on the use case that you have. And just to give you an example of what the data looks like, this is a screenshot of the centre of London. If we look at the 10-meter data, you can see there that it's picking up the River Thames, it's picking up kind of details in the park as well. And it's picking up small patches of improved grassland and small patches of woodland within London. So the 10-meter data is the highest spatial resolution that we have. If we look at the vector data set, this is what it looks like. So it looks a little bit tidier as well. Going for them from the 10-meter to the vector data set does tidy up the landscape a little bit. And this kind of can be useful if you have other spatial data set that aligns nicely with that. We also have the 25-meter data set, which is our kind of legacy style data set. So it's this level of data that's the data that goes back to 1990. So if you want to use the 1990 data and a more recent data set, then you would have to use the 25-meter data set because it's consistent over time. The 1K percentage data is very nice if you want to make maps of the distribution of a particular class across all of Great Britain or all of the UK. And this just shows the percentage broadleaf woodland and also the percentage urban data sets. Oops, sorry. And in terms of what we're doing at the moment, we're currently working on Land Cover Map 2024, which will be released in the second quarter of the year, so sometime around kind of May or June. We're also working on what is going to be the kind of first and an occasional Land Cover Map series of reports where we just document some of the things that we know about the data, but that maybe wouldn't make it into journal papers, but that we feel it's useful for people to know. So that occasional report will be released about the same time that we release Land Cover Map 2024. And we're also working on a Land Cover Map data portal. And this probably isn't kind of that relevant for people that have access to LCM through EDINA, but it will just give that same sort of access and kind of browsability to people that don't have the EDINA access. So people will be able to look at the data and produce maps from it. And the two images on the right just show some of the satellite data that we're using for LCM 2024. So if you want any further information, then you can look at the EDINA website, the UKCEH Land Cover Map page. We've also got a dataset document that is bundled with the data when you download the data. And we've got a couple of journal papers. The first journal paper discusses the actual data set. The Carrasco 2019 paper talks about the methods and explains a little bit more in detail about how we actually make the land cover map. If anybody's interested in land cover change particularly, then we also did a report for the Office for Environmental Protection last year. And if you Google OEP report land cover change, then you'll come up with that report, but it's got some useful information about kind of where we are in terms of kind of land cover change and change over time, and also kind of describe some of the changes that we're kind of planning to make going forward. So that's all there is to say on the land cover side of things. I'm going to stop sharing now so Emily can talk to you about the other data sets.
Right, that should be sharing the right screen. Yeah, so I'm Emily. I'm here to talk to you about the Land Cover Plus groups of data that we've got. So yeah, so I'm a spatial ecologist at the UKCEH, and I do use these products quite a bit, well, most of them anyway. So yeah, let's dive in. So as Claire was saying, we have the Land Cover Map, which is our starting point for the Land Cover Plus products. The Land Cover Plus is mostly looking at sort of, we have the land cover, but can we know more about how the land is used? So this is more of a land use focus, looking more at sort of how the land is managed and what the features are inside it. So we have our first one, which is Land Cover Plus crops. And from this map, which is largely from the arable and horticultural land use from the Land Cover Map, we can then derive the Land Cover Plus fertilizers, pesticides, and hedgerows maps as well. So we'll start with the crop map. The 2024 data for this, I believe, is available now on Digimap. I think I saw it there, which is quite exciting because this means this is our 10th year of crop map data. We've been producing this annually since 2015. It was the first Great Britain-wide field level crop map. And this is produced jointly with by UKCEH and remote sensing application consultants. And these maps are created using Sentinel-1 backscatter and Sentinel-2 optical data. And this gives us nearly 2 million fields each year of field parcels that are defined to crop type, and up to 16, I think at the last count, 16 different crop types are classified and verified. And I say up to because in the earlier years we had fewer crop types, not because we were looking at fewer fields, but because later the technology has improved, and so we are able to diverge some of those original classes into more classes. So for instance, winter wheat in later years becomes winter wheat and winter oats. And so if you're looking at consistency, you can backtrack what those crop classes used to be. Since 2018, we have seen significant improvement in the quality of these maps. So I think in 2018, we saw about 85% overall accuracy. And then I think it was 2023, it's gone up to 91%. Haven't actually had a look at this year's data, it's very brand new. Yeah, and then a bit about how we get this data. So each of the different crop types changes in its colour and its texture through the growing season. And these are changes that we can detect using Earth observation based on the different signals that are returned at different points in the year. And so for this instance, we take different signal readings at different points, and then we can align it, and that will help us improve the differentiation between the different crop classes and improve the overall accuracy as well. As I was saying, we've got multiple years of these data sets, which means we can use it in various ways now. I largely use it by collating the different years together, and you can look at, for each field parcel, what the different crop type has been in the different years, so you get a crop sequence. And then from that, you can look at the different patterns in space and in time at a range of different scales in both of those dimensions. You can also incorporate additional data sets based on what your field of interest is. So we can look sort of more simply at, well, not more simply, but more directly at agriculture and ecology, but also we can look more indirectly at economics, and also look at addressing policy as well. I thought I'd share some research that's been done looking at the crop maps. So this first one is research done by Sharp et al. Back in 2021, looking at simulating crop sequences based on the crop map. So along with the crop map data, they also were looking at data of the environmental suitability of each crop. So that's things like climate, topography, soil type and region. They also brought in different cropping rules. So these were limits on things like continuous cropping and the frequency of each crop in each sequence. And from these things, they could then simulate crop sequences for 200 years based on current data. And from this graph, for instance, we can see there were different patterns in cropping based on the different geography of the different regions. And then another piece of research I did with some colleagues looking at crop rotations. So this was after the other piece of research. So there were more years of data, so we could start to look at which sequences are either able to rotate fully within a given sequence, or which ones look like they're starting to repeat and therefore cycling into this rotation. So we were interested in looking to see if crops were rotating in this way, whether we could see spatial patterns when we classify rotations, and whether we can predict the next crop in a rotation. So we were looking at most of the land that is covered by the crop map, and we found over 11,000 different rotations, which is quite a lot. But then when we look at the proportion of rotations compared to land that's not rotational, so whether it's long-term grassland, or what we are calling complex rotational, which is the other crop sequences where it could be rotational, we just can't see it because maybe the rotations are longer than we're measuring, or because there have been instances where the farmer has an ideal rotation, but because of the bad weather, the winter crop that was going to go in has now become a spring crop, and so we're not detecting it as this strict cyclical rotation. Even though rotations were a small type, when we did classify them in different ways, we could see these quite strong spatial patterns across the country. And then with predicting rotations, we saw that prediction accuracy varied quite a lot, between 36 and nearly 90% in the different models we ran. And we saw that our approaches were generally more accurate when we included long-term grassland in our predictions, when rotations were longer, and when the spatial context we included in our models was more local. Moving on to the next Land Cover Plus product, the fertilizers maps. These are the average annual, the average annual fertilizer application across England. And we have these for nitrogen, phosphorus, and potassium. And we get these in the total kilograms applied per kilometre squared per year. So these products, unlike the crops, which is a vector, these are a 1 kilometre raster product. And these data sets show us a snapshot of what fertilizer application was like in the years 2010 to 2015. And for each fertilizer, we have an application map, and we also have a map of uncertainty as well. And these data sets were produced using the British Survey of Fertilizer Practice data, and then along with some spatial interpolating and looking at the crop area, this was able to produce these 1 kilometre applications that we've got here. The pesticides maps are quite similar, well, superficially anyway. They also are looking at average annual application, but of 162 different active ingredients of pesticide. They're also on the scale of kilos per kilometre squared per year, so another 1 kilometre raster. But this time it's covering Great Britain, so we've got data for England, Wales and Scotland together for this one. And this is a slightly different snapshot window of 2012 to 2017. But again, we've got these for each of the pesticides, we have application maps and uncertainty maps too. The pesticides maps were created using pesticide usage survey data from FERA and also from Scottish Government. We know that pesticides are crop and location specific, so this helps in the modelling of them. And then the crop maps from 2015 to 2017 were used in this modelling and for filling in gaps of data where they were. So both the pesticides and fertilizers maps have been used in research. So the pesticides maps have been used to estimate agrochemical exposure risk in honeybees using citizen science data. And we've also used them for modelling pesticide loads using the INVEST nutrient delivery ratio model. And then both the pesticides and fertilizers together have been used in another study where they were being used as a proxy for land management intensity. So pesticides and fertilizers can affect multiple ecosystems. It's not just restricted to agriculture. And this quite excitingly means that there's quite a wide scope for research, depending on, yes, which area they're touching really. So we can look at things like prediction of environmental impacts. We can look at planning, intervention and mitigation. And they can also be used as a baseline for further development. Our final set of maps is the Hedgerow map, and this came out last year. We've just had an update for it last month, I believe. this is an image here from a visualization my colleague put together when the one last year was released. It's quite fun. You get to like explore the map. So I recommend going back and following that link to have a look at it yourself. Oh, wrong way. The Hedgerows map was also another snapshot style map, and this time it's for the years 2016 to 2021. And this details about, well, just short of 400,000 kilometres of hedgerows in England between 1 and 6 metres tall. That is quite, it is quite a big data set, but we do have, as a nation, we have quite a big density of hedgerows. So it's quite exciting that we have this as a map now. The data set gives details of 6 different height classes between 0.5 metre and 6 or over metres. Hedgerows at least 2 metres long are mapped. And we also have some details on hedgerow structure, or well, estimated hedgerow structure, whether it's single or double, for instance. This data set was produced using Environment Agency LiDAR data, and this LiDAR enhances the previous UKCEH woody linear features product, which I think it just mapped location and length, whereas this time around we have the height classes as well. So not only is this new map more detailed, but it is more accurate as well. And the Hedgerows map spatially integrates with the Land Cover map and Land Cover Plus products. So the polygon shapefiles we have for the crop map and for the Land Cover map vector, those polygon edges are where the linear hedgerows will be, so they connect exactly. This does mean that if there are hedgerows that exist in the middle of a field, not as a boundary, these won't be picked up, but hedgerows are usually at the edge of a feature rather than in the middle. And then also to note are that urban areas, I believe, are masked out from this. And this is because there's quite a lot of confusion between different structures in urban areas and hedgerows. It can be a lot harder to define what a hedgerow is if you've also got garden hedges, which aren't quite the same thing, or you've got lots of walls or other structures that look similar. So in this case, we don't have urban hedgerows mapped. The hedgerows data are compatible with countryside survey height classes. So we've got that connection again. It can be used alongside other data. And we do have 80 to 90% accuracy of the length compared to field verification. So they are quite accurate. Just to give you a visual of what these maps look like together, if we use this as our base, we can then put the crop map on top, and we have the different fields showing the different crops. And then, as I said before, the hedgerows map, it uses the field boundaries, so it snaps to those edges. And you can see that it is quite detailed in terms of breaking up the different height classes and different parts of the hedgerow. So that's, yeah, quite an exciting feature. And then again, we see the different width classes as well. So our hedgerows data set is, well, we're treating it as a benchmark data set. We're hoping that we can come back to this in 5, 10, 15 years and repeat it and see from those data sets how the state of hedgerows has changed. The hedgerows data set could also be further developed, for example, to include things like carbon storage, which is quite a hot topic at the moment. And then further research could potentially be into things involving sort of hedgerow height. So we can look at management of hedgerows from hedgerow height. You can also get, well, use that potentially to look at different species, different ages. And then hedgerows are wildlife corridors really between different areas of woodland. So habitat connectivity is another potential research interest that would be useful. There was a podcast that was released last year when the Hedgerows map was released, if you'd like to give that a listen, and we've got some other scientists from UKCEH talking about the map a bit more. I suppose similar to Clare, there are some things to look forward to with the Land Cover Plus products as well. So later in 2025, we're hoping there'll be a new iteration of the pesticides maps. So not only will it cover like a broader time period, that time period would be broken up into 3 smaller ones. And this is to capture more the changes that we see in pesticide use in legislation, for instance, in the country, because the neonicotinoid ban came in partway through the whole of the data set last time. So it'll be interesting to see sort of what happens before that comes in and after. So we've got 2012 to 2014, 16 to 18, and 20 to 22, and they will show different things. So this new data set will follow the same data and methodology where possible as the current Land Cover Plus pesticides maps. And that'll be later this year. And then, as usual, next winter, we'll see the 2025 iteration of the Land Cover Plus crops maps. Just a note on licensing. All these products are free for research purposes through Digimap, which is the same as the Land Cover Map vector. If anyone has any licensing queries, I'm not the person to ask, but I can direct you to them. Or if you use Digimap for your data sets, then I recommend contacting them or email spatialdata@ceh.ac.uk. Thank you very much.